Hey, this is Colin, and at our latest Blackjack boot camp, we had a special guest, Daryl Purpose. He came and spoke to the boot campers, and if you don't know who he is, it's by design, but Daryl is a Blackjack Hall of Famer, a highly skilled and accomplished advantage player with over 4 decades of experience, and he recently won the world's fastest card counter competition at last year's Blackjack Ball. He's also a great storyteller and an accomplished musician with 10 studio albums. And his talk at the boot camp was so great, we were able to convince him to come back the next morning and record this podcast for you all. So without any further ado, here's our podcast interview with Daryl Purpose. Hey guys, this is Colin from Blackjack Apprenticeship, and I'm joined by ST1, Joe748, and our guest, Daryl Purpose. Daryl, how are you doing today?
Hi, Colin. I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
So you were our special guest at the boot camp last night, and that was a blast.
It was fun.
I want to ask you if you'd be willing to retell the story of how you got into card counting.
Oh gosh, yeah, certainly. Well, it all starts, my mother put a book called Beat the Dealer. You've heard of it. But in my Christmas stocking when I was 16, now she didn't know it was about gambling. She did not know she was making a professional blackjack player out of me, but she thought I just liked to play cards. And this was a book about cards. It seemed to be having some popularness, and so she put it in and so as a teenager, I left home in my 63 Chevy with $50, one extra shirt, and my guitar. That is all I had in that car. And I drove east from Los Angeles. And we know where that goes. So I landed in Vegas. I don't know how many of these details you want to hear. I included some details I'd never tell last night, but basically I ended up, getting a room for a week for that $50. I just taught myself how to count at that time. The Thorpe book didn't really have a good exactly way to go into casino and count and win. That 10 count, was kind of maddening, really. But anyway, I ended up learning. Somebody handed me a copy in two pieces of paper. It was a copy of the high up one, and with a side of aces and a side of sevens. And I just studied. I had this little card table in my cheap little apartment, and I just got my 10,000 hours in. When I was a teenager, and I met a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy, and I ended up in Ken Houston's place at the Jockey Club trying out. And they gave me a deck. I counted down the deck. They said, that's 10 seconds. I said, is that good? They said, that's the fastest we've ever seen. and so I was on the team, and I sort of became the team trainer right away. They actually fired all the other counters at that point. And they just took me and my longtime partner, Craig Brennan, and we were the 2 new counters for the team. And yeah, we did that for a bit.
And what was the moment where you realized that this could be your profession?
Well, there were a couple of moments. I remember before I met Ken, I went and knocked on the door. I had found out that Ron Carr, a BP from the Ken Houston team, lived around the corner from me. And I found that out, and I went and knocked on his door. I said, hi, my name's Daryl. I'm your neighbor. I play blackjack. And he was the nicest guy, and he ended up being a friend for a long time until we lost him just a couple years ago. But he invited me in, and he answered my questions, and I went back home and studied for a couple more months, and then went and knocked on his door again. Hi, I'm still your neighbor, and I still play blackjack. And he said, well, we've got a maybe proposal for you. We want to play some hot shoes while we're doing this other work. We have this other project that we're working on, but we want to just make a little money and play some hot shoes while we're doing it. We'll pay you $25 to go out and sit on a shoe game on the strip. And, when the count gets good, you put your fist to your cheek. $25. And I called my mom and said, Mom, I'm a professional. Right? And then I guess the second time I was at the marina, and we were doing that. We were actually doing that. And I was at the old Marina Hotel. I know you guys are too young to remember that, but it was on the strip near Flamingo. I think maybe near Tropicana. I don't know. It was, it was a medium-sized casino in those days, and we had 2 guys on 2 sides of the pit calling in a BP, going back and forth between these 2 tables, and And the pit boss said, "All right, you pointing at all of us, and started talking about what happens to people like us. We end up in the desert." And then I called my mom. I said, "Mom, it works." They don't like it.
How many hours had you played with Craig prior to hooking up with Ken Houston?
I actually just met Craig when we both tried out for the Ken Houston team.
Okay.
But we became partners when we left the Ken Houston team. We ran teams for the next 10 years or so.
So you solo counted and like after you trained a bunch prior to the Ken Houston, were you actually playing on the tables?
Solo counted. I was going $1 to $4 in the beginning on the single deck.
That's solo counting.
Played downtown, had those 4 clubs, which I think those 4 clubs are still there, right? The 4 Queens, the Golden Nugget,
Yep.
the Horseshoe,
Yep.
and the Fremont. Yeah. Are they still there?
Yes.
Oh my God, that's so crazy. So I was just going 1 to 4 in those games, and because I didn't really have any money, and I met a guy, my friend Art, who he was going 5 to 20 on a game at the Horseshoe. I could see that he was counting,
High roller.
He was the big money on the table for sure. And this insurance play came up, and I could tell by his insurance decision that he was also counting aces on the side as well. And he was counting high up 1 just like me. And I followed him, and he got nervous, but he became my longest friend in Blackjack. He's still my friend. He knew somebody who knew somebody. I think he knew a guy named Roy Hoppy, who was also a BP on the Ken Houston team. And Roy mentioned that Ron Carr lived around the corner. So that's how I heard about that.
Did you stick with high opt 1, or what did you use with Houston?
Yeah, they were all counting the Revere advanced point count.
Okay, so the 10 seconds, first off, it wasn't the count that you'd originally learned.
It was high up 1. No, it was high up 1.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just counted it high up 1.
Got it.
With aces on the side. And maybe, I don't remember if I was counting 7s on the side in that moment. I might have let go of that.
Your 10-second count was with a side count.
Right. Just this year, I was having dinner with Dr. Thorpe, and I was telling him, this was before the blackjack ball and the card counting contest, and I was telling him, because he talked about counting fast in his book, Man for All Markets, but he did not mention my name, and so I was telling him, I used to count pretty fast. And he's so brilliant, he's so great. And he says, so, we talked about it for a while, and he says, so why did you want to count fast? It's like, oh, nailed. It's like, I said, I just cared too much. I just didn't know any better. That counting fast. I think we talked about this last night, where that counting fast and really learning the intricacies of a pretty simple game, right? The real deep stuff, probably made me hundreds of dollars over the years. but it did give me a deep knowledge of the game that came out in other ways. I could figure other things out because the basics of it, the rest of it was so hardwired in me, in my DNA. So I'd like to say it wasn't for nothing that I got to be such a fast card counter.
People that have had the sustained successful careers like you, there's something different about the maybe passion they approach it with than someone that's a little more flippant, you could say.
Sometimes I trip across guys that are new at it, and including my daughter, who I've been training, and the level she thinks is the target for card counting, the level of understanding and being good at it and fast and accurate and understanding it, is just much less than my level was in those early days. But we had nothing else, right? We had nothing. She's got a lot of other things to think about now, but I had nothing else to think about but counting cards. I was alone in Las Vegas with a lot of time.
And a dream.
Are you going to give her a hard time if she only counts it down in 11 seconds?
Well, here's the thing. I know she's going to make more money than I ever did. She's really bright, and it won't have anything to do with counting down a deck fast.
Well, I think also just the environment. You talked about this last night. Like, there's never been a better time. People want to look back, and I'll let you expand on that more. But I have like a protege that I decided to lean into. And I say that all the time. I'm like, this kid is going to make 10 times the money that I ever do in my life because he started so young and the opportunities, and he sees them, and he's sharp. And it's just, I think about that. I'm like, wow.
Yeah. And it's mostly because I think they can do well now because there's just so many casinos. Mm-hmm. When I started, there was just Nevada, right?
Yep.
And pretty much just Las Vegas. And pretty much just the Las Vegas Strip, and pretty much just those 5 casinos in the heart of the Las Vegas Strip, So it was just not. And then, when gambling became, America's pastime, God save us, truly, it was incredible for us, just lots more opportunities.
When they started adding more decks, to the game, how did you and your teams go about that? When it first started, were you guys just like, oh no, what's happening?
No, there was a real understanding that it was a trade-off, that the single deck, was obviously a much better game, much more powerful game, but the casinos were afraid of counters on the single deck. And a shoe, was much more of a grind, but the casinos would let you play. So we understood that going in. And the fact that you could get, monster edges on the single deck in any one particular, and the shoe was a grind. Yeah, we understood the math, and I don't think we took advantage of whatever we could take advantage of. Yeah.
Not that you would like specifically know because you're not them, but do you think that when the casino started implementing that because of their fear of counters on a single deck, that they really thought they found something like, okay, we'll show them?
Oh, I'm sure. Like we were talking last night, just like the 6 to 5, that's today's current version of that. They really think they found something. It's great because they feel very safe with that 6 to 5.
Yeah, but there are ways too.
There are ways.
How important in those earlier days was an act, or kind of the way you carried yourself at a table, or could you just sit and be a robot?
Yeah, no, the act was much more important than those days. I took a pretty long break in the middle of my adult life. And when I went back, the thing that was so different that I just couldn't get used to was in those days, if you were betting black, you had to have a suit on. You really did.
Wow.
You really had to dress up. And I just couldn't get used to the fact that now you can go in your shorts and play black. I mean, it's just incredible. It's an incredible difference.
That's interesting to hear, and I think good for people to hear. We've been really trying to make an emphasis on, if you want longevity, you have to have a good act. Otherwise, I think there's some young people, they get the math down and they're just eager and they go out and then they get backed off really quickly. Maybe there was a brief period with the expansion from Nevada and Atlantic City to the whole country where, maybe you could get away at some places because they didn't have the knowledge of the game in obscure parts of the country, but those days are over. You
Right.
have to have a good act, but it's interesting to hear. Well, you had to back then too.
Right. Well, you had to so much that, what I did was just to do the BP thing. I was 20 years old. I didn't have an act, and I wasn't going to have an act. It wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Right. So I called plays for BPs almost my entire 20s. Yeah, I never had an act.
It's also interesting, like when you think about it, like the prototypical thought process behind like what a card counter looks like. Young, white kid, dresses this certain way, whatever. Even nowadays, it's really difficult at that age to pull off an act that's believable. Like it's much harder on, even though that's what's thought. I think even the casinos think like a young white kid throwing around big dollars. So let's check him out. Card counter. it's like, to your point, it's really hard. You weren't going to have an act back then. Like what exactly can you do to explain? Now there are things, and sometimes you just keep taking the back offs and you just move through it until you age, and then your acting can develop more and things can be explained more, etc. But it's a tough spot to be in when you're younger.
Yeah, we were always trying to find a good BP, and you almost couldn't tell like what would be a good BP. We had a guy named Art. I was talking about him a little bit last night, and he was just very outgoing and wild and crazy, and that was Ken's act too, and Ken had a great act. Just wild and crazy. Like drunk but not drunk. That kind of thing, and. Our best BP ever, though, a guy named Rocky. Rocky was a small Japanese man, sushi chef. We found him in a sushi restaurant, and we said, we think we could work with you, and he never said a word, and he was the best BP we ever had. I remember the Mandalay Bay, him just betting chocolate, just one-handed chocolate, for like a couple of hours, and us winning 100,000, and he didn't really speak to them at all. But I guess he might have said a name, like one name or something. They eventually brought him a card, because they wanted him to have a card, and it never didn't work. It always worked with Rocky.
What was it about him that drew you guys to it? How did you know when you looked at him? He must have exuded.
Well, even back then, I mean, now everybody knows, but back then it was kind of, wait a minute. These Asians.
Yeah. I was going to say the superpower.
That is a superpower for sure.
Is there a story from those, maybe your first decade of playing, that kind of captures the vibe of advantage play back then?
Oh gosh. I think I was telling you yesterday that I've forgotten most of my stories, and I decided that when I write my book, I'm just going to go have to interview people and say, tell me what I did. So, it was a different vibe. The Houston team, that was a different vibe, the jockey club, and, I was going to say the brilliance and the drugs and the, and everything, I mean, thank God I've never drank or used it never got me, but, it got Ken. There was that, but there was much more to it. There's my time with Craig and other guys my age, Munchkin, guys my age who, we were just nerds, we just liked games, we liked to play backgammon in our spare time, just play backgammon against each other for hours and hours. There was that vibe, so we'd hang out. Like I had a condo in Vegas. And, we would just hang out for hours and hours, and we would do a lot of practicing. We would count cards. We would play against, just like they did at the Blackjack Ball, the contest one-on-one. We did that against each other quite a lot. So I've had a lot of experience with those kind of. So there was that mode where you just had a baseball game on in the background, or MTV. This is in the 80s, the new MTV, and we were just playing games. That was our life.
When was the first time you branched out to play internationally?
Well, I mentioned it last night. I got flyered by the Griffin Agency really early on in my time with the Houston team, and it was really hard to play anywhere for me. And so I flew to Aruba. We flew to Aruba, and we played there. I told a story last night of discovering shovel tracking for myself when I was there, just like, coming to the end of a deck and it has a real high count, and thinking, damn, I wish I'd known those cards I was never going to get those cards. I've been betting to get those cards, and I'm never going to get those cards. I wish I knew where those cards went. And I'm watching the shuffle, and I was, whoa, I can know where those cards go, can't I?
Did you come back and share this with teammates, or?
Well, I think Craig was on that trip with me. So I started talking about it then, but it was new, and really all we knew was count down a deck, wait till the count gets high. And then, cause if you're tracking, you don't really know they're there. And a lot of people had that point of view. Cause I was like, well, you don't really know they're there when you're counting down a
Yeah.
deck or a shoe, right? You don't really know they're going to come out when you place those big bets out there. But people poo-pooed it a lot. Ken did not believe in it. Grosjean has never believed in it.
There's a lot of people that will, to this day, say I lost a lot of money trying to track shuffles.
You really got to think. It's not as simple as, like I heard about somebody teaching it. I mean, I think you can teach well, you're teaching it today, aren't you, Colin?
I give a brief demonstration. Yeah.
But, the idea is to teach the idea of it, which is to watch where the cards go. But when people start thinking they can, break it down into exact clumps and know exactly how to play, I mean, no, you got to be thinking all the time when you start getting to the edge of the clumps. And are you really looking at how many cards the dealer's pulling off this stack and pulling off that stack? And, some games are easier than others. Obviously, in those days, it was pretty straightforward. It was mostly 4 decks and mostly 3/4 of a deck on each side one time through.
Pretty consistent grabs.
Yeah.
When you're playing internationally, the penetration is usually worse. Some people in the past have accused Houston of being at fault for this because he went on TV in Europe and showed them how important the penetration was. And then that's just the story. I don't know. Do you think that's true?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, he was my friend and he died young. I don't have too much bad to say about him, but Al Francesco certainly did, and with good reason. Yeah. And he's gone too now. Wow. Yeah.
I asked you this last night. I hope it's okay to ask again. What's maybe the hardest part of team dynamics?
Huh. What did I say?
You said it's really hard.
It's a big thing. Oh, I think I thought, I don't know if I said it, but I thought I don't know if I'm the best person to ask that question. Because I have never, I was on the Houston team, and I was like with my friends, and I led teams for most of my, after I was, when I left the Houston team. It's all hard. Yeah. Personalities are hard. Everybody needs something different, It's the same in relationships, I was never good at relationships either. And I think I was never good at teams, I was good at being a leader, figuring out what we needed to do and telling people what to do. But, I had a really interesting teaching my daughter. I've had some really interesting experiences. Like she's like, at some point, she just broke down and said, we figured it out. She didn't know what she was breaking down over, but she was breaking down over the fact that I was mean to her in teaching her. I was mean to her in a way she didn't know this guy. And I was just about, you got to get this right. You got to do this, you got to do that. And it's because this and because that. And every time I heard her say a sentence that I thought maybe she didn't understand some concept, I was like all over her. And so finally it became a joke, but I really learned, it's like, don't be a dick, even if you're right, don't be a dick to your teammates or to your people you're teaching, especially your daughter.
I know you. Well, I have a problem of being direct. You're a direct person.
Right.
And it's your desire for them to get it right. And to be good.
It comes from a good place.
Yeah. I just don't want you to kick yourself too hard and say you're being a dick. That's a great learning experience. And I have to learn that all the time. Like SD1, you are way too direct sometimes.
Right.
Remember people's feelings. And I can imagine your daughter, that's a whole different level.
And we've talked about it with other people we know, including at one time when you were there.
Mm-hmm.
And we were practicing on the kitchen table.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I've been told I was a dick at that time, too.
Yeah.
you tell me. But you're like me.
I am.
You would do it the same way.
I would have. And I think I told you that then, too. Yeah. That worked out, though.
It really did.
Yeah.
It really did, yeah.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about, it is a tough balancing act. I spent some time running teams and you have to have a high standard. That's one of my biggest regrets is our standard should have been even higher. And I didn't really have anything to compare it to. And so it felt really high. Should have been even higher. But we'd have grown men breaking down crying over failing a test out. And I'm not used to that. And I just want to like put my arm around them and be like, it's okay, bro. You know, we got you. How do you be kind? But man, you can't lower that standard. It's that is a tough thing.
Yeah, I mean, and as I'm thinking back about it, I mean, I definitely had a high standard for everybody, and I lived the high. I showed them what the high standard was. I wasn't asking them to do anything I didn't do.
On the flip side, with a well-run team, what does it feel like operationally? Like, I don't know. Does anything come to mind of just that feeling or that experience where it's just meshing?
I don't know. Maybe you could probably answer that question better than I could, Colin. You ran teams for many years, right?
For a number of years. Trying to think of seasons of well-oiled machine.
I mean, I think it's like when everything's going well and everyone's winning, then it's easy. But when everyone starts losing, that's when the cracks start to show. Did you have any problems like when you would go on really bad losing streaks?
We only went on one. And Munchkin mentioned it last night, you know, and he said, he was like, we had bankroll in 5 countries in multiple currencies, and it was just, and we were just flying. I remember that year I flew to, I don't know how this even works. I just know it as a fact, and I've remembered it. Or I flew to Korea 11 times that year. What is that? you know, it was just a lot was happening. And we ended up basically at the end of a year of some really good blackjack play, breaking even, basically. You know, we had a possible dishonesty, and which we never really confirmed or knew, you know. And yeah, that can get really tough. I mean, I think when it's going well, everybody knows their role. Because, you know, on the teams that I was on, I mean, everybody had a role. We weren't, you know, it's like a lot of these counting teams, everybody's kind of doing the same thing. So I didn't experience that much of that. On my teams, everybody had a role. You know, there was people that could read, people that could BP, people that could not BP, you know.
I was going to say something similar, that those times where it felt the best, it's when people are discovering things or bringing in a unique skill, kind of like those different roles where people find out, you know, maybe we got one guy that he'll go to the most obscure locations and find something. You know, for us, it was almost exclusively a counting game, but still to find a place that, you know,
let you play.
And other people, they didn't want to take the risk of, it could be a busted trip if they spend all their time traveling somewhere really odd, and then someone else might, you know, be able to be a really good BP or a really good spotter or, you know, managerial skill, whatever. When everybody's bringing something different, it's the whole thing of the sum is greater than the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. That feeling is pretty special.
When you're feeling like everybody is sort of offering different things and it equals out, and you don't worry you're not worrying too much about it equaling out, but still it feels like it's equaling out. That's when it's good. And then when you're winning.
Yeah, of course.
Always helps.
It really helps a lot.
If you can say, it's okay if you can't, but where was the most off the beaten path casino you think you've ever played at?
Well, I told the story about Sri Lanka, you know, so we played in the DAV club. It was an underground casino in Seoul. And that, you know, so the same trip as Sri Lanka. So now I'm going back to Seoul because I'm going back to Korea. And, you know, they had one of the largest casino in the world at the time. Walker Hill, is still there probably. But anyway, this was and it was called the Disabled American Veterans Club. There were no disabled people. There were no Americans, and there were no veterans. It was run by the Yakuza. And, you know, that was the one where I mentioned that, you know, we got way down and we were like, oh my God, are they cheating? Are we, yeah. And then we won it all back and some. And they said, well, we'll pay you later. And I'm like, we hadn't experienced that in Las Vegas. You know?
And then you had to stay back. Is that right?
Yeah, I had to collect the money. Yeah.
What was the casino in Sri Lanka like?
It was small. There were 2 civil wars going on at the time. So nobody was there. It was like, I don't know, did we really think this out? It's like nobody was vacationing in Sri Lanka. Colombo, I guess, was the capital city. Like nobody was going there to hang out at the Hilton and be at the pool like we did. And
do you remember what your cover story was for them?
No, but we didn't speak the language, so we didn't really have to have too much of a cover story.
Oh, fair. Yeah.
You're reminding me. I also told a story about me and Munchkin in England, and we went to I guess it was Leicester, England, and we looked it up, and it turned out they had a sock factory there. So we said we had a sock company.
Probably not a lot of follow-up questions.
Yeah, right.
No, that's good.
You make socks that can fit lithium-ion batteries.
Something like that.
Yeah. So you've been an Advantage player. I know you took a break for a while, but for quite a while, how do you personally think about the trade-off between longevity and maximizing EV in the short term?
Good question. Hard answer. Hard to answer. Yeah, that's a choice that you're making not only on a per year, but per month and per day and per minute. You're always making that choice, when you're out there, what's good right now and what's good for longevity. And so it's a constant thing, right? You've got to, the dealer has 18 and you're sitting there with a hard 17. What do you want to do? You make 50%, because of my studying, I knew, that you make 50% of your bet by hitting that. It's a good hit. You got $1,000 out there. You're putting $500 in your pocket by hitting that. Do you want to hit it? I don't know. Every situation is different, and you're just constantly making those choices. Or do you want to play here in this particular casino that has a good game, but in the old days it was Griffin, and now maybe it's something else. I don't know. What is it now? OSN
and Biometrica.
Biometrica, yeah. That's a constant decision. Do you want to play this good game you found in this club, or would you rather just play somewhere where they won't flyer you? They won't flyer you. And how to make that decision? Yeah, I don't know. I think everybody has their own thing. Sometimes I'm not playing that much these days, but as I began to get older, I began to think, well, what's longevity for me, right? If you're 21, if you're in your 20s or 30s, you potentially have 30, 40, 50 years ahead of you. Mm-hmm. You really want to think about it. And if you're making enough money, I would think you'd really want to lean toward cover and longevity, I don't know. Do I? I want some longevity, but I don't have that many years left.
You're hoping to not be grinding in another
right
decade or so.
Right. And I'm only grinding now because my whole life, I would rather play music, and I have made that choice many times.
Well, depending on what your daughter's career looks like, that might keep you in the game a lot longer than you expected.
Who knows?
Can you think of one practice drill you'd keep if you could only keep one?
For card counting blackjack?
Sure, yeah.
For beginning blackjack players, is to remove the 10s and 9s and 8s and 7s too, and just deal hands to yourself as if the dealer has a 10 up. And so learn how to add up the hands.
Yeah.
Learn how to add up the hands. That's even before you start counting.
Yeah, that's good. You remove
lots of aces, put extra aces in there. I feel like that's a good one.
Yeah, that is a good one.
And I was helping her when she was on your site, and there was something I really liked that I had never thought of before. What was it? I remember it was to make the deck go very positive.
Yeah, front loaded.
Just count. Yes. Or just start at 18.
Sure.
That was it.
Yeah.
That was what I saw. I just thought that was brilliant. I'd never thought of that. Yeah. Just start at 18. Count down 6 decks.
Yeah.
Whoa. right?
Negative 18, minus 18.
Right, minus 18,
Yeah.
because that's where your mistakes happen. Although, what are you doing at the shoe? It's
Yeah,
minus 18.
Good point. Good.
Thank you, Daryl Purpose, for saying that. We preach it. Colin's been preaching it forever.
Exactly. People are like, why don't you have all these negative deviations? Because you shouldn't be playing.
Right.
Or if you're
Right.
playing, it's a minimum bet, and don't worry about that. Worry about
Right. I don't know why that reminds me of Grosjean when he would wonder about whether he should give people the correct play for something that would only come up if they had made a mistake to begin with.
Oh wow.
It's like,
Yeah.
Did you publish that? I don't even know what he decided.
So what's a highlight from your blackjack career when you look back at it?
Oh, we were talking about this last night, and my out of casino moment was winning the card counting speed contest at the Blackjack Ball last year with my love and my daughter also there. That was big fun.
Yeah.
In a casino, I would have to say I was playing 3-card poker, and I learned to play 3-card poker for this game, and then I pretty much never played. I don't remember playing 3-card poker again. This was maybe 10 or 15 years ago. I was in England, and the dealers had a funny shuffle, but you could kind of follow it, and you cut with your hands, a single deck.
Oh wow.
And so I had a situation where I knew what cards were on the bottom of the deck, and I could cut it. A lot of it was just big cards really favor the player. Just it's like blackjack, but even more exaggerated.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to cut in the big cards, you want to cut out the little cards, and so there was that. But I realized that, and so my first play out there in this, incredibly Mayfair, the Mayfairest of Mayfair casinos, where I've got my tuxedo on, and all the 13 people that are taking care of me all have their evening gowns and tuxedos on. So it's like that kind of casino, right? And it was the first play, and I realized that, oh wow, they're shuffling when the big cards go down there, and they're not shuffling when the little cards go down there. At some point I realized, I can sort of do stuff here, but to really nail it, because we were talking about cutting exactly and knowing what your hand is, and I realized that, I was going to have to do something with little cards. And so I realized this, and then a couple hands later, a new dealer comes in, and she starts handing me the deck in a weird way. And I remember one time I tried to cut the way we had practiced, and then I realized the way she was handing it to me, I was going to have to cut end to end. And so I practiced that once, and then boom, the cards come out. She scoops them up, and I'm like, oh my God, 6, 7, 8 of diamonds is there for me. And, so I had to watch her shuffle, but not act like anything was going on, not be too interested. Keep her not thinking about the cards, but, not distracting her too much. And, she ended up handing me the deck, and the only way I could cut it was end to end. And I was pretty sure those cards were there. And if I cut 6 cards from the bottom, I would get the 6, 7, 8 of diamonds. So I cut it, and in what they told me was the biggest payout in the history of Mayfair casinos on 3-card poker, I cut myself a 6, 7, 8 of diamonds.
That is so rad. Oh man,
That's a good one.
It gets better. I have the video.
What?
No way.
I have the
so when
video.
you're feeling blue, you just put on.
I've never done that, really.
Wow.
A few hours later, Munchkin gets an email from a guy he knows and says, "What's Daryl Purpose doing in London?" And I, of course, wasn't playing under Daryl Purpose. He was a consultant. He was called, and he recognized me, and we ended up going back and forth, and it was kind of like an agreement. They wouldn't spread my name around. I wouldn't talk about what they were doing.
Yeah.
And I insisted they give me the video.
Oh, nice.
And so I have the video.
That's cool.
Back to kind of the good old days of blackjack, you kind of said now is kind of a better time than ever if you're going to card count because back then there's so few casinos. But is there anything that you do really miss about those old days compared to now? Maybe like a procedure or something, or something that just you don't really find anymore. That
I don't think so. I don't think so. It's sort of like, do you want the game to be more easily beaten? Do you want that game? Or do you want a game that's hard to beat? You kind of want a game that's hard to beat.
Yep, I agree.
Right? So I kind of don't miss anything. I'm healthier now than I was then. I mean, there's just so many things. I'm better at my relationships than I was then. You know, I mean, I was an idiot, you know, when I was younger. I don't know about you guys, but I've kind of grown up. I like who I am now. There's nothing I would bring back about those days, I don't think.
Do you have any good advice for managing nerves those first few bets?
No.
Why don't you share a little bit about your escalation in betting, though?
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. I was talking about this last night. Yeah, how at one point before the Houston team, there was a guy who was going to have a card counting single deck, 25 to 100. We were all going to bet 25. There's 6 of us. And I just thought, wow, that's a lot. That's a lot of money. You know, I mean, I might have still been 19 at that point. I'm just like, that is and you know, I didn't grow up with money, and that's a lot of money to put on a game of blackjack. But I ended up winning, being the big winner. And then they said, okay, we're going to go to 200. We're going to go to 50 to 200. And I just thought, I'll just have to quit. I'll just have to quit. I can't do that. I can't put $200 out on a table, and like, you know, that's crazy. I did it anyway. Somehow I got over it. I don't know how. I don't have any advice for anybody. And then it was shortly after that Bill Erb, Kin's partner, gave me the nickname Chunk, because I just liked to bet. I very quickly turned into somebody who could overbet really easily. You know, I just loved to bet. I mean, with an edge.
I really appreciated you telling that story last night because it's so human. And I think that people can assume, you know, oh, well, these pros, they don't, you know, these Hall of Famers, they didn't have nerves or you know, and it's a process for all of us. I appreciate that story because I get nerves, or I got nerves, or any of those things. You know, it was just like really tough to, in some ways, to up those stakes. There's also thrilling, but you know, I remember the biggest bets I ever placed and being like, this is crazy. What am I doing?
Right.
I'm sure with all your play, you've had some pretty memorable comps, maybe back in the day or before. Like, do any of them really stand out to you?
Well, you know, like in my younger days, I was always calling plays for a BP, so I wasn't comped that much. I do remember, you know, having a few nice rooms in Reno or Lake Tahoe, and my mother, you know, I called plays for my mother. She was a great BP, and she had the Frank Sinatra suite at somewhere. It was like the Sahara, the Riviera, one of those. So that's kind of fun. Oh, in Atlantic City, I went to Atlantic City with the non-random shuffle computer, and I was the BP there. And they gave me a limousine and had put, you know, me and my friend, and there were 4 of us, and this limousine was instructed to take us to New York and do whatever we wanted and pay for it.
Wow!
So
that's
a big one.
That's a big one. You know, but I love the story. I love is my story about the podcast I heard. Was it you? It was somebody. It was somebody on your team, maybe, or was it you on that podcast, Colin?
I don't know. What's the story?
Well, it was This American Life.
Oh yeah. No, that wasn't me. That was someone on our team. Yeah,
that was one of your teammates.
They kind of cut me from that.
And you know, it was like when we were talking earlier. I don't know. I don't think it was on the podcast. I was talking about how I've just been resistant to reading. You know, I haven't read a blackjack book in 20 years, and you know, I've just avoided. You know, there's a movie I'm in that I have not watched, and then there's your movie, which I've not watched, you know, and so I like it. And I avoided This American Life. There's my favorite podcast at the time, one of the only podcasts, right? And they had a segment called Blackjack, and I just didn't listen. And finally I listened. And there was a segment on your team with one of your guys. Who's the guy that was on it?
There were a few guys interviewed, but I can't remember who it was.
Okay. But anyway, and he was talking about that. And most of you were Christians, right?
Yeah,
You're
a good number, yeah.
A good number of you were church-going Christians, yeah. And so that was always interesting to everybody. But Keith Taft, right? There was a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, there was a lot. Anyway, I was driving and I thought, I'm just going to put this on. I was like driving, I think Vegas to LA or something like that. And I put it on and I was like listening. And, and because when the media covers something, it's always horrible. They just don't get it right. They just never get it right, And I was just so ready for This American Life, my favorite podcast, to not get it right, right? And they was talking to this guy, one of the guys on your team, and he was talking about being a church-going Christian and then learning to count cards and beat the casinos and all this was great. And then he'd start talking about going up to his comped room, which was huge, sweet, with a hot tub and room service, anything he wants. And then he says, and looking out the window at the billboards and seeing the strip and just quite a scene, some of these rooms, right? And then he just says, and I was so lonely. And I just wept. I mean, I just cried. I had to pull the car over because I just recognized it,
Yeah.
Yeah. It's silly. These comps are we never have it would be nice to have that for a Christmas family gathering or something, but it's never that. You're always just alone.
Right.
And this great big hot tub and you never use it, Do you ever use it?
No.
Do you ever get in that hot tub?
Not a single time.
I remember the most successful solo trip I went on, and it was that, it was lobster and steak,
right,
and Manhattan at dinner and a great room and just texting pictures to my wife. I was winning and I had all this stuff, and I was happy for the team that I was winning, but it did feel quite empty.
Right?
I think that's and you could probably speak to this. I have been, and for my career, most of it is quote unquote solo. I've never worked with a team per se for a long period. Mine's always opportunistic, short team, like we did. That happens. But those specific trips are the ones that are the best. And I've had ones where we stayed in really shitty places too, compared to the comp suite. And it doesn't matter. Those are the best. And now the times in the last, few years that my wife could come with me on the trip, those are the best trips.
Oh yeah, sure.
It's not about the things they shower on you, because also I think there's an air of, we know what the casinos are. They're not good. And there's that, it kind of adds to the emptiness of what they give humanity too. And I think we recognize that the more experience we have too.
All right, we've got a boot camp we got to put on still today, but I wanted to make sure to ask you, we talked last night about the connection between advantage play and songwriting, and I'd love to hear you share that again.
Okay, sure. There's a few similarities. I think there is something both black and white and exact about both. I think of the keys on a keyboard. Music. It's there's notes and they form chords and they are actual real things and you can learn the math of it. And you can do the same thing with gambling games. But also, each of them involves a real gray area and a real place where you can be creative. Songwriting is just, when I wrote bad songs for a long time, but when I finally learned how to write a song, get out of the black and white and feel something and convert that to music and words and music, it's just incredible. And the same thing happens with games. We walk into these casinos and we have to look at these games in a different way than most people look at them. Most people look at them and, what are you talking about? You know how to you sit down at some random game in a casino and beat it. It's the house. You can't beat the house, and yet we see these games, we back, metaphorically speaking, we back off and let it get a little fuzzy, and just see what they think is random, but it's not random, and then you have a game, but it takes some creativity and some real, so I feel like those are the similarities. I brought some, I don't have many, but I brought a few CDs. I'm just going to leave them with you for whoever wants them.
As a songwriter, did Advantage Play influence how you see people and stories?
Well, I've always been crazy about the story. I mean, really from a teenager, I've loved songwriting and I've loved the stories that come with songwriting. I love telling stories. And I was always the guy who will turn down that dark alley because there's certainly a story down there. In my whole life, I still do it. I'm in love with a woman, and I'm maybe mostly in love with our story. We have a great story. No, I love her too.
So, Daryl, with all your years of experience and everything that you've seen, may or may not still be active, if you could give one bit of advice to new or existing Advantage players, what do you think it would be?
I think you asked this question last night, right? Or maybe Colin asked it. I started to talk about expected value just to understand the, but I think of now another way I answered it last night too, but I'll say both of them. Yeah. To expected value and to really understand what expected value is, because it's really hard for some people. They just, you win or you lose. Well, in life and in games, you have to think about what your expected value is, because that's what's in the long run, results veer towards expected value. So understanding that concept. And then I think the other thing I said is, I advise people is to be healthy, and the number one thing is to get some sleep, get good sleep. It's so easy. Last night, I'm here in Las Vegas. I woke up at 3 a.m. and I was up till 6 a.m. I did not follow my own advice.
You must have been staying downtown, or
no. Oh, because it's so noisy down there. Oh, that's crazy. Yeah. You don't want to stay anywhere other than Circa, right? Because you won't sleep at all.
I appreciated that you gave the advice about expected value, because we'd spend over an hour having a talk at the boot camp about the EV behind the game, and just the people that get it, they know what triggers you can and can't manipulate. If you don't, you're gonna shoot yourself in the foot. And then I went to bed early. I felt bad. Everyone's still hanging out, and I'm like, following Daryl's advice, I'm going to bed because I got a big day ahead of me.
That's great. I had an effect. That's wonderful. And through you'll have effect on all these.
That's right.
Card counter today, and
let's hope so.
It's all good.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and sharing very raw, real stories and a lot of great wisdom with us. So thank you.
It was fun. Thanks for having me.